The shooting range went completely silent when they realized who he really was. What started as just another Tuesday morning became a moment none of them would ever forget, because sometimes the most dangerous man in the room is the one nobody notices. Welcome to Old Glory Legends Tales. Before we begin this powerful tale of hidden legends and earned respect, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Lane 7. Always Lane 7. The old man arrived every Tuesday at 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the Riverside shooting range officially opened. Mike, the young clerk behind the counter, barely looked up anymore when the familiar figure pushed through the glass doors. "Morning, Mr. Martin," Mike would mumble, sliding the sign-in clipboard across the scratched counter. "Morning." Always the same response. One word. No smile. No small talk. Thomas Martin. That's all anyone knew. Last name only on the registry. No rank listed. No veteran discounts claimed. Just cash payment. Lane 7. And 30 rounds of 45 ACP. Every single week for the past 3 years. The regulars had their theories, of course. Jerry, a retired trucker who favored Lane 3, figured Martin was probably ex-military. "Look at how he stands," Jerry would whisper to his buddies. "Ramrod straight. But hell, half the guys here are vets." Danny, the range safety officer, noticed different things. The way Martin never flinched at unexpected gunshots, how his eyes constantly scanned the room. Not nervous, just aware. And that walk. Deliberate, measured, like every step was calculated. But mostly, people ignored him. Martin preferred it that way. He'd arrive in his faded jeans and worn flannel shirt, the same brown baseball cap pulled low over silver hair. His boots were old but clean, and he carried his gear in a simple black case that had seen better decades. No tactical vest, no custom grips, no fancy optics, just a basic 1911 pistol that looked like it had been carried through hell and back. "Pops probably thinks he's some kind of gunslinger," laughed Brad, a college kid who came in weekends. "Bet he's never even seen real action. If only they knew." Martin's routine never changed. Lane 7, furthest from the entrance. He'd set up his single target at exactly 15 yards, not the standard 7 that most recreational shooters preferred. His movements were economical, almost mechanical. First, he'd inspect his pistol with the kind of attention that spoke of years of training, drilled so deep it had become muscle memory. Every component checked, every surface examined, safety confirmed. Then came the ammunition. Exactly 30 rounds counted twice, no more, no less. He'd load each magazine with the same careful precision, fingers working with a steady rhythm that suggested thousands of hours of practice. The other shooters were loud. They talked about their jobs, their girlfriends, their weekend plans. They argued about calibers and complained about their groupings. They took selfies with their targets and posted Instagram stories about their range day. Martin existed in silence. When he fired, it wasn't rapid, no mag dumps or spray and pray. Each shot was deliberate, with a pause between that most people mistook for old age slowing him down. They were wrong. The pause was assessment, breathing, mental reset, the kind of shooting discipline that only comes from places where every bullet matters and missing isn't just embarrassing, it's fatal. His targets told a story the casual observers missed. Perfect groupings, center mass, every time, the kind of accuracy that made the range officers do double takes and the competitive shooters stop their conversations mid-sentence. "Guy's got good eyes for his age," Danny once mentioned to Mike. "Hell of a lot better than the kids who come in here thinking they're Navy SEALs." If Danny only knew how close he was to the truth.
Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison had seen his share of shooters. Fresh out of instructor duty at Quantico, he was on terminal leave, trying to decide whether to re-up or take that security contractor job in Virginia. The Riverside Range was convenient, cheap, and usually quiet enough for serious practice. He'd noticed the old man before. Hard not to when someone shoots that consistently. But Morrison was focused on his own training, preparing for whatever came next. He had goals, standards to maintain. That Tuesday started like any other. Morrison arrived at 7:30, signed in, and headed to Lane 5. The old man was already there, of course, methodically working through his routine. Morrison was halfway through his first magazine when he heard it. Not the sound, the rhythm. 3 shots. Pause. 2 shots. Pause. All perfectly timed, perfectly controlled. Morrison had heard that cadence before, in advanced marksmanship training, in specialized courses where they taught shooting techniques that weren't in any manual. Combat breathing. Stress inoculation, the kind of rhythm you only learned in places where the targets shot back. Morrison glanced sideways through his peripheral vision, careful not to stare. The old man's stance was textbook, if the textbook was written by someone who'd actually used these skills under fire. Weight distributed, grip pressure consistent, follow-through that spoke of ingrained discipline. But it was the way he moved that caught Morrison's attention. Between strings of fire, the old man would scan the room with his eyes, while keeping his weapon pointed downrange. Quick glances, threat assessment, situational awareness. Morrison had seen that behavior before. In combat veterans, in operators, in the kind of men who'd learned the hard way that danger could come from any direction. The old man finished his 30th round, set his pistol down, and began his cleanup routine. Same methodical approach, everything in its place. That's when Morrison saw it. As Martin reached for his cleaning kit, his sleeve rode up just enough to expose his forearm, and there, faded but unmistakable, was a tattoo that made Morrison's blood run cold. Not because it was intimidating, because it was impossible. Morrison knew that insignia. Every Marine knew that insignia. Hell, every special operations guy in any branch knew that particular piece of ink. First Force Reconnaissance, Vietnam era, the real deal. But not just any Force Recon tattoo. This one had details that made Morrison's mouth go dry. Additional markings that weren't standard. Numbers that corresponded to operations that were still classified. The kind of ink that wasn't given, it was earned in places that didn't exist on official maps. Morrison had heard stories, whispered conversations in instructor schools, references in declassified documents with so many redacted lines they read like black poetry. Operations in Laos and Cambodia that never happened, conducted by Marines who were never there. Deep reconnaissance, direct action, the kind of missions where success was measured not in territory gained, but in intelligence gathered and lives saved, where small teams of impossibly skilled Marines walked into hell and somehow walked back out. Morrison's hands were shaking slightly as he set down his own weapon. He looked at Martin with new eyes, seeing past the flannel shirt and worn jeans to the man beneath. The way he moved wasn't careful because of age. It was careful because of training. Decades of muscle memory from a time when carelessness meant death. The silence between his shots wasn't hesitation. It was the kind of fire discipline that only came from environments where ammunition was precious and every round had to count. And that scan he did between strings, that was threat assessment, automatic, unconscious. The kind of behavior that kept operators alive in places where the enemy could be anyone, anywhere.
Morrison found himself standing without realizing it. Other shooters in nearby lanes had noticed something was different. The energy in the room had shifted, though most couldn't say why. Martin finished cleaning his pistol and started packing his gear. Same routine as always. But now Morrison saw it differently. The way he secured each item, the way he checked his surroundings one final time, the way he carried himself, not like a retired civilian, but like a warrior who'd never really left the battlefield. Morrison made a decision that would change everything.
"Excuse me, sir." Martin looked up from his gear bag, meeting Morrison's eyes for the first time. Up close, Morrison could see details he'd missed from a distance. Scars on the hands, a slight irregularity in the left ear that suggested blast exposure, eyes that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. "That ink on your arm," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of respect reserved for confirmed kills and confirmed courage. "First Force Recon. Vietnam." Martin's expression didn't change. He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it, just waited. "Staff Sergeant Morrison, USMC," Morrison continued, offering his name as both introduction and credential. "I had instructors at Quantico who served with Force Recon guys like you. They told us stories." "Stories," Martin said finally, his voice carrying the weight of years and the authority of experience, "are for people who weren't there." The words hit Morrison like a physical blow, not harsh, not dismissive, just true, the kind of truth that separated those who'd lived it from those who'd only heard about it. Around them, the shooting range had grown quieter. Other patrons sensed something significant was happening, though they couldn't name what. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the brass stopped falling as people paused their training to watch. Morrison stood at attention. Not the exaggerated posture of ceremony, but the natural straightening that happens when a warrior recognizes another warrior, when a Marine acknowledges someone who'd earned the right to be called brother. "Sir," Morrison said, and the word carried decades of respect. "Thank you for your service." Martin studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out something Morrison had only heard described in whispered conversations. A challenge coin. Not the standard issue variety handed out at ceremonies, but the real thing, battle-worn, edges smoothed by years of carrying, inscribed with unit designations that most people weren't cleared to know existed. He placed it in Morrison's palm. "Earn it," Martin said simply, and then he walked away, leaving behind a silence that spoke louder than any story ever could, because sometimes the most powerful words are the ones never spoken. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones nobody knows. Sometimes the man mopping floors or shooting quietly in Lane 7 carried more history in his silence than most people would ever understand. The shooting range slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed. Brass began falling again. But something had changed. In the space of 5 minutes, one old man had reminded everyone present what real strength looked like. It didn't announce itself. It didn't demand recognition. It just showed up, did what needed to be done, and disappeared back into the quiet places where legends wait for the next person wise enough to notice. Martin drove home the same way he'd come, alone, silent, carrying his history like ammunition, loaded, ready, but only fired when absolutely necessary. Because that's what real warriors do. They don't tell stories, they become them. Have you ever met someone like Martin? Someone whose silence spoke louder than words? Tell us their story in the comments below. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Old Glory Legends Tales, because some legends deserve to be remembered, even if they never asked to be.